Hello, folks. This is the last one. It's the last time you'll have to hear from me for at least 24 hours. I can't see me doing anything tomorrow morning. So we have talked about various aspects of D-Day, the French reaction. We've talked about what Stalin thought. What we haven't talked about is how some of the units that participated in D-Day still exist in various shapes and forms, and their role has evolved, but the lineage maybe carries on. And we haven't at all this week tackled the troop carriers and their vital role, bringing over both paratroopers and gliders, and then later on lots and lots and lots of supplies. So I'm going to bring in my guest. So you know her better from her own fantastic podcast. Mother of Tanks is running the Why We Fight podcast, who is producing. It's kind of the only person who puts out the same kind of quantities as I do. In fact, more possibly sometimes than I do. So we are prolific. We've obviously got nothing else going on in our lives. We just create content. So I'm going to bring her in now. So good afternoon, Sasha. How are you today?
I am okay.
Good.
It's been a day, but I'm here.
But you've been at work. And now you come back for this. So, there you go. Yeah. But, we'll bring up your PowerPoint now, and you've got Pixel there to help out there as well. So the 37th Troop Carrier Squadron, it still exists, but its role has changed. So I'll hand over to you to take us through this presentation. And feel free to do as many plugs for your own podcast as you want to, and YouTube and what have you. But the links are in the description below. So over to you.
I appreciate that, and I apologize because Pixel wants to also give the presentation.
We have no problem with co-stars,
So I'll try to keep him quiet. Yeah. So the 37th, it's the Airlift Squadron now, and that's actually the squadron that I work for. Stop. It's the squadron that I work for. And but it started out as initially the 37th Transport Squadron, and then quickly changed to the Troop Carrier Squadron. But like Paul said, when we think about World War II, we're almost always focused on like the combat, the ground forces, or the fighters, or the bombers. I mean, Masters of the Air is all about the bombers, and that's great. It's exciting, but what about the troop carriers, the transport people? And since I'm working with them, I did some research and I wanted to tell, some of their story. And I will talk about how the squadron began, and I'll give a little bit of history there, but I'm going to try to focus it more on like what they were doing in 44 so that we can see, so that I don't spend 3 hours.
Is there going to be Lego? You promised me Lego.
I promised you there are Lego, and I've got more. So tomorrow I'm giving a shorter version of this talk for the squadron, but only some of them are going to be present.
But we've never had Lego on the channel before, so that's a first.
I've got new sets that have not been assembled yet, but you're going to love them.
So
but
exciting.
the ones that I did assemble, I mean, I even have little French resistance fighters keeping me company.
Oh, that's so cool. I did not know they existed.
Yeah.
Oh. We talk about the different medias through which history is shared in video game. We haven't actually done Lego as a concept, a learning about the past concept, but
I love them. And these are most of the ones that I have are Kobe brand out of Poland. At least I call it Kobe. I don't know if they pronounce it as initials, but it's COBI. And they are made here in the European Union, and they have a fantastic historical collection. I actually started with some for the Korean War. And then when I realized that they had all these World War II ones, in my storage back in the States, I've got like 18 different tanks. And here I've still been buying more. So I'm going to have much more.
I'm not even going to go to the website because I know it'll just start a thing, and I don't want to start another thing. I'm not going to go there.
Do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, right.
So I know you want pub time, so let me get to it. In 1942 is when the squadron was initially formed, and it was established and activated in the middle of February of 1942, along with the group that it belongs to, the 316th Transport Group. Both of those were renamed or rebranded in July as the Troop Carrier Group and the 316th Troop Carrier Group and the 37th Troop Carrier Squadron. There are 3 other squadrons, but let's focus on the one that I belong to. They ended up falling under the 52nd troop carrier wing, which was established in June of that year, 42, but they don't join them in the Mediterranean until later in 43. The 316th, along with its 4 squadrons, go to North Africa in late November after we've landed during Operation Torch. But yeah, the 52nd wing was still stateside. It was training squadron stateside before they would deploy, and then ultimately falls under 12th Air Force in the Mediterranean. The wing itself did not participate in the invasion of Sicily, but all 5 of the groups underneath the 52nd did. They carried paratroopers and gliders in Operation Husky. Oh, I am not changing the slides. I am so sorry. I'm looking at this going, I need to make.
I was just going to mention to you, and I thought, no, I'll.
Yeah. No. I'm sorry. I was just like so excited to talk about the story, and I'm like, okay, here we are. I did include pictures because I will give the talk tomorrow, and I wanted the squadron folk to see. Like, this is a squadron headquarters in North Africa. It's a little bit different than the squadron headquarters now, and airfield construction. A lot of the airfields that they had to work with in North Africa and Sicily and Italy were ones that they had to develop or improve. And so, like, this is 3 days of work just so that they could use it. And here we go. This is where I was in Operation Husky. So the 2 that have the blue boxes around there, those are the ones that were conducted by the 52nd groups. And they were, let's see, in May, from May of 43. So North Africa campaign, they're there from the end of November of 42 until about May of 43 when it ends. In May of 43, they start training for this to drop paratroopers and supplies and gliders into Sicily. They, the 37th and the 316th participated in the paratrooper drop on 9 July, which, I mean, the airborne, this is the 82nd because 101st isn't over here yet. They were pretty scattered, but they did what paratroopers do, which is find each other and wreak havoc. And, but then there was a second drop on the 11th, which was supposed to be reinforcements. And that ended up in there's a paratroopers. There's a second drop with, reinforcements on the 11th, and that was hit with friendly fire. There was a lot of learning that came out of this. I've got another slide on that, but they ended up losing 23 aircraft in that second drop, and over about half of the ones that do make it back to North Africa are severely damaged. They do receive.
To say it was a massive learning curve, Husky, is an understatement. But yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's something that comes up in my series all the time, is how much and how quickly we had to learn. And we're learning different things, but also, like, the ground forces have to learn their lessons the hard way, and the Air Force have to learn their lessons the hard way, and they have to learn how to cooperate together also the hard way. But we're doing it very, very quickly. They do, in the summer of 43, received their first 2 distinguished unit citations, one for their operations in North Africa and one for their operations in Sicily. I believe that the one for Sicily does note that they were hit by an awful lot of fire. I don't think that it specifies that it was friendly fire, but it was. But we did learn an awful lot of lessons. So lessons coming out of that, we determined that airborne forces should only be used for missions that are best suited to their unique roles and capabilities, and not to use them if we can accomplish the same mission by other means, quote, by other means more economical and equally well suited to the mission. So it's kind of like, don't use a hammer, that type of thing. We also learned that we determined that we need better ground and naval and air cooperation, and the ground and naval forces need to be notified at least 12 hours in advance of any airborne operations. We had tried to notify them for that second drop, and the message just didn't get there fast enough. And then eventually we get invasion stripes, like these ones.
Oh, hang on, I've got to put it on the screen. Oh, yeah, lovely, yeah. And there's the first, the toys and Lego. Oh, there we go. Oh, so I
And
shouldn't
this,
say toys. It's a model, isn't it?
it is a high quality display, Paul.
A display
It's a
artifact.
display. There's a I almost hit myself in the face. There's a little pilot in there too.
Oh, so I'm jealous
And
now.
and the door for the paratroopers opens. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so we learn to do invasion stripes. Now the decision for these invasion stripes doesn't actually come until just a couple weeks before D-Day. And interestingly, we run a test, like a small scale test of these invasion stripes on June 1st in 1944. So just a couple of days before D-Day. And the reason we're doing this is to familiarize it's over the invasion fleet, and we're trying to familiarize them with this new pattern, 3 white, 2 black, that kind of on all the aircraft. But because of operational security, we don't tell the squadrons to do this yet. The troop carrier units are told to paint their aircraft with invasion stripes on 3 June, and the fighters are told on the 4th. So it's like just days. And it's like, can you imagine you spend all this time training and preparing, and you know that this mission is coming, and then just 2 days before you're told, all right, now you got to paint all your aircraft. But yeah. The squadron and the group moved around a lot. I'm not going to talk about all these locations, so don't worry. But they, Paul, I know you've had a full day. But I do want to talk about, at the time that we're invading Italy in September, well, it's not really an invasion. We're landing in Italy in September of 43. The squadron is operating out of, the group also are operating out of Sicily. But they're, I don't know what happens between 3 September and 15 October, but at some point in there, then the entire group is in Egypt. And when they're in Egypt on around 15 October, they're given orders to relocate completely to Sicily, to another airfield than the one that they were operating out of. And it's kind of interesting. So they were over here at El Kabrit in Egypt, and on 16 October of 43, 3 of their aircraft arrived at Borizzo Airfield in Sicily, and they were immediately redirected to Tunisia. And they're told, all right, now you're going to run shuttle service between El Kabrit and El Aouina. And I've got another slide. For the next 10 days, these 3 aircraft run 45 round trips. Each trip is 3,600 air miles, and they're moving everything that they can move by air. So all the people, all the supplies, except the vehicles, ground transport, and any kind of large equipment that can't be transported easily by the aircraft. Those are going to go by convoy, which is also almost 3,000 miles if you go directly, according to Google. And the ground convoy it has 2 officers to lead it and 32 enlisted folks that are driving the vehicles. And they leave around 26 October, and it takes them 3 or 4 weeks. Because, 3,000 miles, you think, why 3 or 4 weeks? But they can only go as fast as their slowest vehicle and as fast as the terrain allows. But all of this movement, and then they get to El Aouina, and they're able to take like a ferry to get across to Sicily. But all of this goes without any kind of incident, except one. One aircraft at one point has an engine failure. So I don't know if you noticed, they've only got 2. So, so they had an engine failure, and nobody was hurt. But at the time that the engine cut out, a whole bunch of supplies were like flung out of the aircraft. And so that's the only thing that showed up in the records.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, considering how new air travel is at the time and how dangerous all of this is. But yeah, so at Borizzo Airfield, they are, and you guys will have to forgive me, I had my notes printed and I left them on my desk. So I had to pull them up on the computer too. Truck convoy. So the 52nd Troop Carrier Wing and all of its groups are now going to be located at Boritso. If you look at this map, this map is actually showing all of the troop carrier locations in Italy and Sicily. So that's not including like any fighters or bombers or anything like that.
Yeah.
And where the red circle is where they ended up going. This is what it looks like today. It's abandoned. I mean, it's nothing fancy. And this is in 1943, 44. And they're only there from like 18 October to the middle of February. And then they get orders to go to England because the decision has been made. Normandy is a focus. And now we got to prepare and make sure that everybody's ready. And with all of those lessons learned, they need to get ready. The 52nd Troop Carrier Wing and all of its groups, including the 316th, are going to leave the 12th Air Force and also the 12th Troop Carrier Command that is in the Mediterranean, and they're going to now fall under the 9th Air Force in England. This reorganization, this leads to a reorganization. I was looking for the word. It leads to a reorganization in the Mediterranean. So we had the 51st and the 52nd Troop Carrier Wings. The 52nd is going to England. The 51st is staying in the Mediterranean, but they're now going to be under the, they're no longer going to be under the 12th Troop Carrier Command. They're going to be right under 12th Air Force. But the Mediterranean Allied Tactical Air Forces is going to have operational control of the whole Mediterranean. So it's a little confusing. The Air Force is very confusing. Everything I know about the modern Air Force, I learned in the last 3 years.
But it is indicative of the fact that there's this big reorganization happening ahead of Normandy, where it's the same, aircraft, ships, tanks, and personnel, but they're now being structured differently, with regimental combat teams on D-Day as opposed to, divisions, things like that. And it's that management aspect came up in the show this morning with Nick Hewitt about the Navy. You've just got to, and you've got to set into place the orders of who's in charge of who, and where does this fit into this when there, and what's the hierarchy of this, and it's complicated, that era. I mean, it's the struggles of big war. The Allies have got a lot of stuff, a lot of resources now, but you've got to coordinate it. And as James Holland always says, the Germans have that kind of freedom of poverty because they have less of stuff, so it's easier for them in some ways than it is for the Allies with the complexity of moving all these moving parts that are extraordinary.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, Air Force structure is a little weird to begin with. And it's, at this time, it's still very new. We're still trying to figure out the best.
You don't exist. I mean, you're still part of the army, aren't you, really?
I jokingly said that in the episode I released this morning that, the Army tells its history. The Air Force could tell its history, but, at the same time, that's like Army history. And so sometimes they don't want to do that. I did want to point out, so this model has the 4U on it, and that's my squadron was at this time, the 37 Troop Carrier Squadron was Whiskey 7, and those are the planes that we see. Oftentimes we see them in the pictures when we're talking about D-Day because their Whiskey 7 planes were were the first to cross into enemy-held territory. But this particular plane belonged to the 89th Troop Carrier Squadron, which was part of the 438th. They're also going to England. And they end up dropping the 2nd and 3rd 502nd, which are part of the 101st. And then also going to England, obviously, would be the 439th, which dropped the 506th, which are, from Band of Brothers.
Yeah. But
I just included that in my notes because I was like, I should make sure that I note that because I'm going to talk about the markings on the planes in a minute. This was showing that all those circles are showing where like all the different troops are, not troops, troop carrier units. There will be 56 squadrons for troop transport and gliders on D-Day. The 50th and the 52nd wing, troop carrier wings are partially co-located at, Paul, do you say Cottesmore or Cottesmore?
Cottesmore, I think. Yeah.
See, because I wasn't sure. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
we make it difficult with our place names. And every time there's a rule, it then doesn't apply to the next town you come across where they do it differently. So I think it's Cottesmore. But
well,
someone
at least
noted it. No, we probably say it because that's how it, there's always a weird version in England and in Scotland.
well, I was
Yeah.
going to say at least they weren't stationed in Wales.
Yeah. Yeah, the Welsh Scrabble editions have 10 extra L's. They don't really, folks. I just made that up.
They might as well. Yeah, so the 50th and the 52nd are partially co-located. They're going to contribute 16 and 20 squadrons respectively. The 50th has 4 groups. The 52nd has 5.
Right.
I'm just getting to the bigger slides. So they are. And the 53rd is also going to be there, but it's at Greenham Common, and it's going to contribute also 20 squadrons. They're going to be towing Waco and Horsa gliders. And this one is not assembled, but I did get a Waco glider.
Oh, probably stronger than the real ones.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah. More long-term construction. They'd last longer a Lego one than a canvas and
Probably.
Anyway. Yeah.
Probably. Under the 52nd, as I had mentioned, is the 316th, which is highlighted there in blue. At this time, it's 80 years ago, they were commanded by a major. It was Major Leonard Fletcher. Right now, in 2024, they're commanded by a lieutenant colonel. And those alphanumeric codes at the end in parentheses are how they mark the planes. So all of the 37th, sometimes there's confusion and people think, oh, Whiskey 7 is a single plane. All of the 37th Troop Carrier Squadron planes were marked Whiskey 7. And right now, you might have seen them. We've got some of our C-130s are at Normandy. They have invasion stripes on them. And at least one of them is marked Whiskey 7.
Oh, I'll look for it. They are coming in so low.
I know.
I look up and I go, that seems lower than it should be flying. To my, but
it might. So I don't know for sure, but it might be that they're flying lower because of how low the C-47s had to fly.
Yeah, I think they're just having fun in a commemorative, respectful
It may also
way,
be
but
that. I was told today by the commander that some of the people got to ride in a C-47. I was like, how stinking cool is that?
Yeah, but I have never, I've never been in a C-47. I meet people who jump out of them all the week, but I've never been in one. So, yeah.
I did, and I'll bring it to the squadron when I do my talk, but I may end up doing the talk twice.
Yeah. So
I just want to say that the commander is messaging me. He said 500 feet.
Wow. Okay. That's
above ground level.
Yeah.
And
I think they're bending that 500 feet from how close it seems from my perspective. I feel like I've got to reach up and touch it, but yeah.
Yeah. They're much bigger up close. But where was I going with this?
We were talking about commanded by
Oh,
Lieutenant Colonel these days, and
yeah, these days, and apparently he's watching. So hi. The planes, they're marked, as I said. This one was with the 89th, and I did want to point this out also. At the same time, participating in the Battle of Normandy is the 9th TAC, the Tactical Air Command, and this included, among other wings, the 70th Fighter Wing. Under the 70th was the 48th Fighter Group, which included the 492nd, 493rd, and 494th Fighter Squadrons. Now, I don't want to talk about the fighter squadrons, but these 3 still exist, and they are here in England. They're not flying P-47s anymore, but they are here, and instead of being under the 70th Wing, they're under the 48th. But I just thought that was pretty cool. Here's one of their P-47s. And I did also, I mentioned the Mediterranean Allied Tactical Air Forces, and they were running some operations. After the 52nd goes to England, they're running some. Paul, can I change is there a way to make it so I can't see the chat?
Yeah, just put it on private chat. Then you just see me.
Okay, because it's distracting.
I get distracted. They're in a funny mood today.
They are. So after the 52nd goes to England, there's these guys in the Mediterranean are still running all sorts of transport. They're transporting things like supplies and people into the Balkans. And sometimes they have to do, sometimes they're doing drops, and they might drop supplies, they might drop partisans, but they're coordinating with the partisans. And this right here is one of the signals that they would light on the ground for a drop zone. And if the aircraft had to land, they would get something like this. And you can see the aircraft in the bottom there. This is all surrounded by mountains. I can't imagine doing this. I would just think, like, you get on the ground, I'm never going to get up again. But I did want to talk a little bit about loading, because half of my squadron is loadmasters. And they would do things like, let me make this bigger. Guns, ammo, dynamite, food, clothing, medical supplies, and specialized equipment. None of the reports that I read explained what specialized equipment was, but I think it was just if the partisans sent a special request for something, then it would go in there. And then from 1944, they also added things like jeeps, gasoline and oil, radios, sometimes mail, and also mules. And I wanted to talk about mules in a second, because I thought it was kind of interesting. But kind of just like today, there are standard packs where, like, there's a list, and here's what you might, oh, I want this, and you know exactly what's going to be in it. There was a load section that would an air load section that would establish, like, the maximum load list for every aircraft. So depending on if they were flying C-47s, then the load list might be similar across the board, but it also depends on what they're going to be transporting. And, the mix and match of all of that maximum load list would be given to a checker. And this gets complicated. And I thought it was interesting because it reminds me of when you travel and the airlines tell you don't leave your bags unattended.
Right.
Because they've got this checker, and this checker takes a truck and his load list, and he drives around to all the storehouses, starts collecting all the items. Then he takes the truck full of items to a loads control hut that's run by a warrant officer, which the modern Air Force doesn't have. They no longer have them. The Army has warrant officers, and many of them are in aviation, which is funny. The warrant officer will have several teams of loaders, and some of those teams might be comprised of partisans. All of the information is going to be reviewed and confirmed that all the details of the supplies that they're going to put on the aircraft and the aircraft itself all match, and that it matches what's on the load list. And then the entire team of loaders is going to get on that truck with the checker and all the stuff, and they're going to go to the aircraft, where it's going to be checked again by a British checker this time, who's going to make sure that everything is right. It's like double and triple check. And then all the loaders will do the packing, and the final checks will be done by a crew chief before it's loaded onto the aircraft. And I just thought, like, there's so many steps there. But I want to talk about the mules because I just can't, I imagine mules do not like to fly. Now, the 37th itself probably wasn't transporting too many mules, but we did in the Mediterranean, and we did in the China, Burma, India, and the Pacific. Yep. And because they're C-47s, it could be done by any of them. But because it is a capability, I thought it was interesting. With the mules, they would have to modify the aircraft a little bit. They would lay down a tarp, and then on the floor of the aircraft, stop Pixel, and then they would put wooden planks down to create like a fake floor that the mules would stand on. But they need to secure them, and so they would put these 2-inch poles across the aircraft, and they would secure them to the sides, and then they would have another 2-inch pole that they would secure across the centers of them to form up to 4 stalls that would fit like the length of a mule. And then the mules would be loaded to the aircraft, which I'm sure that they absolutely loved.
Mm.
And they would be secured. They have their packs and their saddles on, and from the saddle, they would be secured to the strong points in the cabin, as well as those like stall, the poles that were forming the stalls, and they could transport up to 4 at once. Mules on a plane. And once they get off, I'm sure that they loved not them. The mules don't care. They're just happy to be off the plane. But once they're off the plane, then engineers would have to go in, clean out the aircraft, remove all the modifications, all the poles, the flooring, the tarp, and prepare it for tactical missions again. And I'm sure that our people are grateful that we aren't transporting mules.
Yeah,
at least.
Yeah. Skittish mules. They're not traveling very well.
No, they're not. If they were, if depending on the packed materials, so if you're packing them and they're on like pallets or, all packed up like that, then those are going to go by static line, just like the paratroopers. And the static lines are going to be attached before they take off, and before the plane takes off, and then they'll be let out at a later time once they're over the drop zones. If the packages contain mail, if they're like mail only, then the packages would be all red. I guess that signals to people on the ground, hey, is this one important or not? If they have to pick and choose. What I also found interesting was if it's bundles of supplies where it's stuff that can just go and it's probably not going to break on the ground when it hits, if they don't get a parachute, they just throw them out of the plane. And shortly before they approach their target, the bundles are all moved near the door, and they could knock like 8 or 10 bundles out of the aircraft with each pass over their target. And it sounds almost cartoonish. Like I just can't imagine them doing that, because I just thought everything went with a parachute. But it's very similar to stuff that we do now, though. I mean, green light when they're over the drop zone, packs, the packed containers, the ones with the static lines, would go first, and then any bundles or packages of mail or anything like that would go after.
I saw the photo this week of the mobile Burger King that can be taken overseas by the military today. I think it was the US, and it's like it fits inside a C-130 apparently.
That sounds very American, Paul.
Yeah. Because everywhere in the world's already got McDonald's, I guess, even the darkest jungles, but they haven't got a Burger King yet. So the US military have to provide the alternative. And this picture I saw, unless I dreamt it, but I'm sure I did, it fitted inside, I think it was a C-130 or certainly an aircraft, and it's a kind of unfolding, ready to go Burger King.
Yeah. Another thing they were dropping, especially in the Balkans and over enemy-held territory, were leaflets. Or I think the Brits call it nickel. And these would be printed materials, propaganda messages or just informational messages, which could also be propaganda. They'd be printed and bound up. And then when they get to the right location, these guys on the crew would slice those packages open and throw it out into the slipstream so that it would be scattered. And it's basically exactly what you think it would look like. They could also transport jeeps. The aircraft had doors on the sides that would open up, so that, like, bigger than the paratrooper doors. And this one is actually at the airfield in Sicily that the squadron was at, so it might be one of their planes. But it was just interesting. It's not a great picture, but I wasn't sure how many jeeps could fit in, or if a jeep could how it would fit in, rather. And so that answered that question.
And I'm not imagining it about the Burger King. It fits inside a C-17 apparently, and several people agree with seeing it. So I few that wasn't a hallucination of Woody based on lack of sleep. So I'm pleased that my sanity is not in question. Well, about that, yeah. And paratroopers are, they were similar to today with. When they were before they're on the aircraft, they're all inspected again, and to make sure that all their gear is right, that everything is on them right, that they've got everything that they're supposed to have and not anything that they're not supposed to have.
And they're usually inspected about a half hour before they get on the C-47s. And then it's similar though to dropping cargo, the pilots would give them a warning signal when they're approaching the drop zone or the target area, and then the jump signal or the green light when they're over that target area, and then they push them out. But back to England, which is where we need to be. The 37th, along with the rest of the 316th Troop Carrier Group, they were placed here where the blue circle is in Cottesmore or Cottesmore. You can see it's, the next one. I was going to say, you can see it's, I was looking at it going, I made this note. Why am I saying that? It's a bit bigger and more developed than what they were operating out of in North Africa and in Sicily. It's actually, it seems quite big. I'm not sure if this one is still in use. It might still be in use by the RAF.
Pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah. They're preparing for D-Day. All 56 squadrons are going to be conducting roughly the same types of training and preparations throughout the 3 to 4 months leading up to D-Day. They're going to be doing an awful lot of a lot of them are planned. A lot of them are canceled because of weather, but a lot of paratrooper and parapack drops for practice because they need that coordination. They're trying to improve their accuracy as well. A lot of glider towing, and also training to pick up the gliders and like collect and return them after use. There's a lot of formation flying. They are flying. They're at least scheduling to fly mornings, afternoons, evenings, every single day. They're doing formation flying in daytime. At night, they're doing it by instruments only. They are doing instrument only flying, all sorts of stuff. They're also working on their air-ground coordination. And it's not just the troop carriers. Like I said, I'm not focused on the fighters, bombers, or the fighter bombers or any of those, but they're also training and preparing, as well as just bombing the crap out of Normandy and the Pas-de-Calais area, because we have the deception plan going and we don't want to give away where we're going. Let's see.
And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that they're training, because we've talked about it on the show before, but this myth of that everybody in the troop carrier groups being, not well trained and didn't know what they were doing and never done it before is bonkers. And I heard a speech a few days ago by a paratrooper saying, we were kind of let down by the troop carriers, and it needs to die, that myth. It really needs to go.
I don't think that they were let down.
I concur, and I would have gone and said something if I hadn't been doing something else. But there's definitely this idea that the pilots performed badly and that they and it's just nonsense.
I just want to take a little side quest for a second. I did get from the Air Force Research Historical Agency all of the records for the 316th Troop Carrier Group, which included the 37th. And I was reading through their war diaries, and in just one example of March, like they were training almost every single day. They were also doing fun stuff. They were playing movies. There was like a movie almost every other night. There were dances. I jokingly said to an airman that works in my office, I was like, would you be interested if the Air Force started supporting like regular dances for the enlisted personnel? And he's like, that sounds like fun, but I don't know if he would actually go. But it's one of those things where it wasn't just the Air Force. The troop carrier group had its own orchestra that would play the live music at these dances. Some of them were held by the American Red Cross. They were also getting, up until like the last couple of weeks before D-Day kicks off, they were getting, they started to get like 72-hour passes. They could go on tours, like bus tours in Leicester and other areas. And then they would, then the 72-hour pass was cut down to 12 hours, and then like no passes because they needed to lock everybody down. But the training that they talk about is in March of 44. They have these one sentence lines for almost every day for half the month, where it's like, no flying due to weather. all training canceled due to weather. You know, they have like secure OPSEC lectures, security lectures, censorship lectures, safety briefs, things like that. But the training keeps getting canceled. Then you get to 21 March. And this was compiled by a lieutenant. And I just think it shows how, like, even though it's 80 years ago, not much changes. It's the long, he writes a whole paragraph and it says, defense lecture for all combat crews. Captain Cooney, who's the intelligence officer, gave a lecture on censorship and security to the ground echelon personnel. Combat crews were assigned for a paratroop drop mission. They've been trying to do this all month. All the planes were loaded at 1100 hours, and all details of the proposed mission were covered very, very carefully. Pilots, navigators, radio operators, company commanders, jump masters, everyone participating. Mission called off due to inclement weather. And it's like, you can tell that he was so grumpy trying to write this. You know, they've been trying to do this all month, but they are absolutely training. Sometimes they can fly in the morning, but they can't fly at night because of weather, or vice versa. But they are doing an awful lot of flying. They're also training things like the Rebecca Eureka, direction finding and signaling equipment. And they're doing, I think that the instrument flying is probably one of the most interesting, because they're constantly trying to do that as much as possible, but they're also trying to do the parachute drop training as much as possible, because they want to get accurate. They saw what happened in Sicily.
Yeah.
And they, not just the friendly fire, but before that, scattered everywhere. And that as long as they're on the ground and they're, you know, and they're alive, that's, you know, okay, success, but they need to get closer to where we need them. But I was saying the C-47 could hold 28 paratroopers, but they could also transport up to 14 wounded, which ends up being, it ends up saving lives. Yep. Because we're able to get them from France to hospitals in England very quickly. What else? I know, Paul, I'm getting on the, I'm running out of time. This is mostly the fighters and the bombers that are going to be supporting. The plan for the Normandy battle calls for like almost constant, if not constant, air cover and support, and for the entire time. This was interesting. So 9th Air Force at this time had to work in, you know, when they're creating all their plans and training. During the Sicily campaign, we released a new field manual 100-20, which gives 9th Air Force something more to work with as far as a more clearly defined role for the Air Force in support of the ground forces. So they have to make sure that they can establish and maintain control of the air over the fighting area, over all the critical area, for the purpose of eliminating the enemy's capacity to interfere from the air. So we don't want any, we basically want air superiority, and we have it. We have it by the time that we get to D-Day. We also need the Air Force to help isolate the battlefield, and by interdicting enemy movements of troops and supplies. And we need them to be able to render immediate support to the ground forces in terms of like close air support. So that's obviously not the troop carrier squadrons, but this is what 9th Air Force had to work with.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. The French resistance were also going to be important in this. And like I said, I did bring my resistance fighters.
I need to look at them again. Hold them up. They're so cool. I wish there was an optional kind of string of onions accessory to put around the neck, because that's the cliche, isn't it?
They also have a little Citroën.
Which is what James Holland drives through Normandy right now. Whenever James only comes, and it never comes in his own car, in a modern car. It always comes in a Citroën, you know, a Citroën Avant from 1945, I think it is. And he's put FFE markings on it, or FFI in English, and bombers around the lanes. And it's yeah, amazing. Oh, you've got more Lego.
So this one is it's Charles de Gaulle, and I also have Eisenhower in his. Oh, where is it? Camera. There we go. Eisenhower in his command car.
That model of Eisenhower in the back of the staff car is better than the statue of Eisenhower that's been put up in San Margolese. That is just, I think, the worst statue I've seen. It's just awful. I haven't got a photo of it yet, but people are going, is that meant to be Eisenhower? Is it like Eisenhower's evil twin after a night on the pub with me or something in someone else's uniform? It's just, not good.
With the French resistance, we had to find a way to signal them. And so we were using the BBC in their French language broadcast. We were going to do the first 3 lines of a French poem, and that was broadcast on June 1st. And that was telling them that the landings were going to happen this week and that they would happen within 48 hours of the broadcast. Now, we're in 2024. We know it doesn't happen within 48 hours of 1 June, but they were getting ready, and they were going to do things like sabotage and all sorts of sabotage stuff that was going to help us in the long run. Operation Neptune. I mean, you have had people talk about D-Day all day. I'm not going to go into this stuff, but Operation Neptune is the amphibious landings. And we had American forces landing on 2 of the 5 beaches. The Americans were planned to land around 6:30, the Brits around 7:30. And then, and in the episode that I released this morning with Roger Cirillo, talks about the planning for D-Day, and he talks about how we were planning Operation Neptune from 1941.
Yeah.
Operation Boston is the airborne landings prior to the beach landings. This is where the troop carriers come in. And I do have an episode on the airborne with Dr. Rob Williams, and that'll be it. It's a good episode. But he's focused on the airborne, and so I don't have much room to add this part. So I appreciate being able to do this. The 316th is going to carry the 2nd of 505th and the 3rd 505th, both with the 82nd. It's going to be 72 aircraft, and they're going to drop them on drop zone Oscar between around 1:51, 1:57 in the morning, so just before 2 a.m. This is the drop zones from left to right. It's N, T, O, A, C, and D. And that one in the middle is landing zone whiskey, which is mostly for gliders, but because planes weren't landing yet. And this one is where the 37th is going to drop the 82nd near St. Mariglis. Paul, check this out.
Hang on. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. Although we can just throw away the John Steele figure because I don't think that happened. But the point is great. Yeah. But you can taste Lego. You can take it off. That's great. I like that idea. The models you buy in the museum, it's a painted kind of clay thing. You can't get rid of the John Steele, but that you can just take it off. I might invest in that.
They just released it. That's why it's not assembled.
Okay, right.
A lot of people will know this picture. This is Eisenhower talking to the 101st. Eisenhower and Lieutenant General Brereton both visited with the 101st on the evening of the operation. This was partly to show their confidence in the mission, but also to boost the confidence of the men. And the generals both stuck around to watch the planes take off. The 101st are not part of the story I'm telling because my squadron carried the 82nd. So, but the 9th Troop Carrier Command sent over 900 airplanes and over 100 gliders, which they took off from different airfields across England, and they had to assemble in their formations in the dark and head toward Utah Beach. The plan called for 17,000 men. That's an awful lot of paratroopers and glider troops, rather, because the glider troops were not necessarily paratroopers.
Yep.
The flight toward Cherbourg was relatively without incident. It was kind of uneventful. They were escorted by the RAF, and the RAF night fighters and intruders would attack the guns and the searchlights on the peninsula. British Sterlings also flew down south of the actual drop zones and dropped window, which is similar to chaff.
Yep.
And I did an episode back in March on the Nuremberg raid with Dr. Tom Bradbeer. It's actually my #1 performing episode, and he talks a lot about window. No enemy aircraft were encountered. So you remember we had those, the defined roles for the 9th Air Force, and one of them was air superiority. Well, we basically had it. And then the whole peninsula had been attacked by the Bomber Command also. The 37th dropped paratroopers and released gliders near St. Mary-Glise. They were largely the most accurate of the drops on D-Day. They also dropped reinforcements on the 7th, and for their operations in D-Day, they received their 3rd Distinguished Unit Citation. This is, I'm almost done. This is the pub's calling. No.
Mentally, I left half an hour ago. I didn't really. No. No, I'm loving it.
This is the 82nd drop pattern. So this includes the 101st drop zones, which have the dotted line.
Yeah.
But the solid line, it doesn't show where the 101st dropped. It's just the 82nd. And you can see that in around this drop zone, they were fairly well clustered, and so much more accurate, much closer to where they needed to be, their objective. And but yeah, but
we did the show with Marty about the idea of the paratroopers all being scattered far and away, and some absolutely, of course, were scattered far and wide, but a huge amount were really pretty damn close to where they were supposed to be. Drop Zone O being the most successful one. So it's another way the D-Day story has been told that doesn't entirely reflect the truth. I mean, yes, there are some scattered ones, but there are a hell of a lot who are very close to where they're supposed to be, and it's needs to be revised, our understanding of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And all of 1 second, I just want to make sure. More. Yeah. So the if you look, right, the 101st had a really big area that their landing zone, that their drop zones were covering, and the 82nd were a little bit closer together. So they had an advantage, but even some of the other squadrons that were dropping paratroopers were not nearly as accurate as our guys were. And I do want to point out that the 37th is known as the world's greatest airlift squadron, and I think that the fact that they've got a good history for dropping paratroopers at least. But I know that they definitely try to earn that, make sure that they earn that name every day, that title.
Yeah.
This is the St. Mary-Glise for the paratroopers, but I'm not going to go into the paratroopers. I think, and that's it. This is the 37th airlift, the men of the 37th Airlift Squadron in, I think, August of 44, July or August of 44. So this is after Normandy, but before Market Garden, which they are also involved in. Yeah.
Samuel is asking if you know the answer. What were the actual losses for the 37th on the night of June 5th, 6th?
So all of their planes made it back to England. They might have been hit by, flak. I've got 8.8 centimeter flak guns here too, but they're on the table.
Cool.
But yeah, all of the 37th planes definitely made it back to England. And I think that's marked on their Distinguished Unit Citation also. And
my last question. Oh, we got a P-51 as well. Lovely.
Yeah, with it's got the invasion stripes. So yeah.
Indeed. So my last question for you really is going to be about, American military serving in Germany. How relevant is D-Day? Is it being talked about? Are there people mentioning it in speeches? Is it in the news, or is it so far in the past it's kind of not relevant anymore?
You wound me, Paul. No.
Well, I mean, I'm being provocative. That's why.
So I can tell you that all of the units that are stationed in Europe are involved in one way, shape, or form in the D-Day commemoration.
Exactly.
Even ones that don't have a real connection to it, they are there because this is whether it's Army and Air Force, it's American history. It's not just Army and Air Force history, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I know that we did see there was quite the outrage over the Task and Purpose article talking about the Marine Corps being invited by the article said it, but the title of the article did not specify that the Marine Corps was invited by the French to participate in an amphibious landing at several of the beaches on different days as a commemoration for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And a lot of people wanted to give, crap to the Marine Corps because, oh, nice of you to show up, that kind of thing. But I don't like that. I'm all for service rivalries, right? But the Marine Corps trains amphibious landings, and they are tricky. I think I've got pixel hair on my face. They're tricky and they are dangerous, even in training. And so if we are going to do this for a demonstration of capabilities or or for a commemoration event or some kind of public display, we want the people that train it to be the ones that do it. So the Marine Corps was the right people to invite. I know that it was postponed for weather. I don't know if they were able. I didn't check.
I don't think it's happened yet, but I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
I mean, I used to keep a PDF on my desktop in my computer of Marines in Normandy, because although there were very few, there were some.
There were like 300.
There were liaison. There were the protection of crews, captains on vessels, and and there was intelligence, and they were attached. There was famously a Marine by the Jedburgh teams in the Vercors in a part of France. So
there were about,
they were sitting it out. They were elsewhere in the world doing other stuff. It's just they weren't there.
Eisenhower was part of this. Eisenhower was like, no, this is an Army theater. The Marines have the Pacific, but the Army was also in the Pacific. But the Army and the Marine Corps were doing the best that they could with joint operations at a time before we had joint doctrine. And the Marines, so at Normandy, there were like almost 300 Marines present. Now, they might not have participated in the landing, but they were there. There were some Marines in reserve just in case they were needed. And so it's I joke all the time in my series that you can tell from my series that it's heavily influenced by the fact that I was raised on Sesame Street, Star Trek, and Doctor Who. So, it's like that's the kind of mentality that I have. I want people to be included. I want people to feel welcome. I want us to come together and tell our history together because we made it together. And so that's what I've been doing. And I do have, I think 16 or 18 episodes for D-Day or Normandy altogether.
Just 16 or 18. Yeah.
So it's not the 30 that I had for Sicily, last year, but I did not want to give so much attention to the headliners because I know everyone else is, and I can use my platform to talk about the parts of the history that we don't learn well. But when I started talking to my guests, everybody wanted to participate, and I was like, all right, fine, let's do every episode that they want to do. And I ended up with like 16 or 18, I think, and that includes Coast Guard, that includes Navy. And that includes Army, and then I'm counting this. We're including the Air Force too, and so it's going to be fun. But I have too many episodes, and I was recording every day last month, so I didn't have time to edit. So I got the first one. I got the first one out today, and I will get them all out. June will be my D-Day commemoration month. So,
well, people are asking. Who is your doctor? I will say mine is Tom Baker, of course, but you're going to make me feel awful. I feel old. But who is your doctor then? Your.
Ooh, all right. It's a toss between 10 and 11.
Which is 10 and no.
Smith.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Matt Smith, I didn't like initially, but he grew on me. Yeah. And Dave Tennant, I absolutely adored him. Yeah, but Tom Baker was good too, though.
Tom Baker was good. I mean, he brought scarves to the world. So yeah, well, we'll leave it there. It's been fantastic talking to you, and you are doing superb work with your podcast, and I've seen it grow. And you're bringing people on. You're tackling subjects that aren't being tackled elsewhere. And there's even a conversation, a sidebar earlier about the proliferation of 10-minute Omaha Beach histories on YouTube that get millions of views. And then there's people like ourselves plugging away, doing more deeper dives into other aspects that perhaps aren't being noticed, but at least we're getting out there. So I'm going to say goodbye, and folks, I will be back again after. I've got no shows listed, but they will be listed. Definitely Stephen Fisher's going to be here on June 11th talking about Sword Beach, but there may be other things before then. I may be doing some pop-ups out and about, hopefully on the 9th of June when I'm up at Lafayette. I don't know yet, but it's been brilliant. So thank you to all of my 8 guests, including Sasha, and thank you everybody for watching, and don't know how you've managed to endure me for eight separate hours a day, but well done to you. You don't get a medal, but you do get the benefit of coming back after a break. So thank you, everybody. I will see you all again after June the 6th. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.